After 2 months of campaigning, 2 gubernatorial debates, and countless political ads, Election Day is almost here.
Thousands of Michiganders have already cast their absentee ballots. On November 8th, millions more will help decide where the state is headed.
13 is on your side with a guide to some of the biggest races at the top of the ballot, the race for governor.
Incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer is hoping for a second term. Republican Tudor Dixon hopes to unseat her. The governor is running on her record. She's focusing on investment in roads, jobs, and economic development, and balancing the state budget 4 years in a row. She's also pledging to do everything in her power to keep abortion legal in Michigan. Tudor Dixon is putting a lot of her messaging behind fixing Michigan's education system. She's calling for a back-to-basics approach and is vocally opposed to the discussion of gender-related issues in schools. She wants to eliminate the state's personal income tax and is endorsed by former President Trump. Both candidates say they support eliminating the state's retirement tax. And when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the abortion issue became a central topic of the November election. Proposal 3 would modify the state's constitution, guaranteeing a woman's right to choose. Here's a closer look at what the proposal says.
Proposal 3 would amend the state constitution to include a broad new right to reproductive freedom. If passed, the constitution would be amended to allow a woman the right to make and carry out all decisions about pregnancy. It covers many areas, including prenatal care, contraception, and abortion care. However, it also allows the state to prohibit abortion after fetal viability, unless the patient's life or physical or mental health is at risk. Proposal 3 would also invalidate a 1931 Michigan law that prohibits abortion unless the mother's life is at risk. That old law also states anyone who helps a pregnant woman have an abortion is guilty of a felony crime. This amendment would change that. It would prohibit prosecution of an individual or a person helping a pregnant individual for exercising rights established by this amendment. A yes vote on the measure amends the Constitution. Voting no would give the state legislature or judges the right to determine access to abortion.
We are following 3 congressional races. Their boundaries have all changed because of redistricting. First up, the 2nd Congressional District. It is among the largest in the state. It includes parts of Muskegon, Kent, Ionia, Berry counties, as well as many others to the north. Republican John Molinar is running for re-election. He is challenged by Democrat Jerry Hilliard. Hilliard ran against Molinar previously in the 4th Congressional District, but lost by double digits in 2018 and 2020. Libertarian Nathan Hewer is also on the ballot.
I'm 13 on your side's Carla Byron. First-term Republican Congressman Peter Meijer lost re-election during the August primary. He was among House Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump and lost the re-election bid. That set up a showdown between Republican John Gibbs and Democrat Hillary Scholten. Scholten lost to Meijer by 6 points in the 2020 election. Gibbs is endorsed by former President Trump and is campaigning about making elections more secure, including the possibility of moving away from absentee ballots. He also hopes to fight gun control efforts. Hillary Scholten's priorities include helping working families, fighting for more affordable health care, and preserving reproductive rights. Before redistricting, the 3rd Congressional District was a Republican stronghold. It now leans in favor of the Democrats.
And next up, the race in the 4th Congressional District. Congressman Bill Huizenga is going after another term in the U.S. House. Here's a look at the map. The 4th includes part of Ottawa County, all of Allegan County and Van Buren counties, and part of Kalamazoo. Huizenga took office in the old district in January 2011. 2 years ago, he won re-election by nearly 60%. This time around, he's being challenged by U.S. Marine Corps veteran Joseph Alfonso, a Democrat from Holland. Lawrence Wenke from Kalamazoo is also running as a Libertarian.
Several thousand Michiganders have already requested and returned their absentee ballots. If you plan to vote absentee, it must be returned to the clerk's office by the time the polls close on Election Day. Here's a closer look at what you need to do.
All registered voters in Michigan have the right to vote by mail. You can request an absentee ballot in several ways. Voters can complete an online application at michigan.gov/vote and submit it online. Or they can print that online application and mail or drop it off at your local clerk. Requests to have an absentee voter ballot mailed to you must be received by your clerk no later than 5 o'clock the Friday before the election. If you miss that deadline and you're already registered at your current address, you can request a ballot in person up until 4 p.m. on the day prior to the election. Finally, if you are not registered to vote, you can do that up until Election Day and vote in person at your clerk's office. For security reasons, your signature on your absentee ballot request will be checked against your voter registration record before a ballot is issued. The signature will be checked again after you fill out the ballot and sign the return envelope.
And if you're voting in person on Election Day, here's what you need to know. First, if you aren't sure where to vote, the state has a voter information center on its website. You simply type in your name, birth month and year, and zip code. And once you've done that, you can check your registration status, find your polling place, and view a sample ballot. To vote in person on Election Day, you will need to show a government-issued ID. If you don't have one, you can sign an affidavit formally declaring your identity. Straight ticket voting is no longer an option in Michigan, but you can split your ticket. That means you may choose a Democrat in one race and a Republican in another. Third-party candidates are also an option in many races.
Whether you vote absentee or in person, there are two other statewide races on the ballot, the race for Secretary of State and Attorney General. In the AG's race, incumbent Democrat Dana Nessel is facing Republican challenger Matt DePerno. Nessel is hoping to hold on to the position she won 4 years ago. As the state's top law enforcement officer, she points to her accomplishments, including the AG's investigation into child abuse by Catholic clergy and Boy Scouts of America. And she's worked to protect consumers from robocalls and other scams. Her opponent is attorney Matt DePerno from Kalamazoo. He is endorsed by former President Donald Trump, describes himself as a constitutional conservative, and questioned the results of the 2020 election. He is also under investigation for an alleged effort to tamper with voting machines. There are two third-party candidates on the ballot as well.
Now let's take a closer look at the race for Secretary of State. Democrat Jocelyn Benson is also running for re-election. She's up against Republican Christina Caramo. Benson is focusing her re-election campaign on her efforts to provide faster, more convenient service, securing the election process, and protecting election results from people who question the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Christina Caramo is endorsed by President Trump, questions the results of the 2020 election, and promises to focus on election integrity. She also says she will expand the office's investigative services to prevent identity theft.
Voting rights are on the ballot this November. Proposal 2 would make several changes.
Among them, making sure members of the military have easier access to voting. Here's a closer look at what you'll be voting on.
Proposal 2 would make several changes to Michigan's constitution to update the state's voting laws. If passed, Proposal 2 would do the following: add 9 days of early voting, expand access to absentee voting by allowing the people to fill out one application to vote absentee in all elections. Right now, a person is required to submit an application for each election. The proposal would also require the state to provide paid postage for returning an application and complete a ballot to the clerk's office. A registered voter will still be able to vote without a picture ID by signing an affidavit. And finally, the measure would require military and overseas ballots to be counted as long as they are postmarked by Election Day. For a complete list of all the changes, you can find the ballot language at 13onyourside.com. If Proposal 2 fails to pass, current laws would remain in place, but the legislature could make changes to voting requirements in the future.
I'm 13 on your side's Elena Holland. Redistricting has created the possibility for a political shakeup in Lansing. The state Senate has been controlled by Republicans since 1984. That was back when Ronald Reagan was president. Democrats have not held the state house since 2010, but that could all change this year. The 30th Senate district is considered one to watch. Incumbent Mark Huizenga is running for re-election. Huizenga is campaigning on combating inflation, providing tax relief by cutting government spending, and limiting government regulation. He is pro-life and, according to his website, supports the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Democrat David LeGrand, who is term limited in the state house, is running against Huizenga. LeGrand's priorities include protecting and improving education, promoting pay equity and paid sick leave, and preserving reproductive rights. Both candidates are well known, and many political experts say it could go either way.
State Senator Winnie Brinks is running for re-election in the 29th district. The district's borders have changed, but do include some of the same territory, including portions of Grand Rapids Township, and East Grand Rapids. Before joining the Senate, Brink served 3 terms in the state House. Her Republican challenger, Tommy Brand, is in his 2nd term in the House. He's also the owner of Brand's Steakhouse and Grill in Wyoming.
Proposal 1 has gotten the least attention, but according to recent polling, seems to have the most support among voters.
If passed, it would change term limits and require financial reporting by elected leaders.
Proposal 1 would amend the state constitution to make significant changes to term limits and financial disclosures for public officials in Michigan. This proposed constitutional amendment would require members of the legislature, the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and attorney general to file annual public financial disclosure reports after 2023. These would include assets, liabilities, income sources, future employment agreements, gifts, travel reimbursements, and positions held in organizations, excluding religious, social, and political organizations. It would require the legislature to implement the reporting requirements without limiting or restricting them. It would also reduce current term limits for state representatives and state senators to 12 years total between the House and Senate. Senate candidates this year will not be affected by this proposal. If approved, Proposal 1 would bring Michigan more in line with other states regarding financial disclosure requirements.
Michigan voters have requested nearly 2 million absentee ballots. County clerks can't begin counting them, though, until the polls open on Election Day.
And for security reasons, the process of verifying signatures and counting the ballots can take a long time. For that reason, we may not know who the winners are on election night.
We want to set the expectation for voters that it does take time to count your ballots, and we cannot sacrifice security and integrity at the expense of speed.
Clerks do hope to have all of the ballots counted by the end of the day on Wednesday after the election.
Stay with 13 on your side for continuing coverage as we get closer to the general election. On November 8th, we will have team coverage on air and online as people head to the polls.
And once the polls close, turn to 13 Plus from 8 until 10:30, where we will have live analysis as results start to come in. And then tune in on air at 11 o'clock for a look at the results.